Welcome to another Business Spotlight, where we share reflections, insights, and pearls of wisdom from local business owners. My name is Kerry James. I'm a business coach and a facilitator, and today I'm delighted to welcome the Business Spotlight co-founder of Prestige Private Health, Dr. Wesley Tensel. Good morning to you, Wesley, and great to have you on the Business Spotlight.
Morning, Kerry. Thanks for inviting me on. It's an honour. Hopefully we'll have a nice discussion this morning.
Excellent. Well, let's get stuck straight in. Prestige Private Health. There's a bit of a clue in the title, but give us a little bit of the background, please. How long have you been in business, and what area do you specialise in, please?
So, Prestige Private Health, as you can tell, it's a private health company. So we've been registered with the CQC just since towards the end of 2022. So it's a fairly new business. But what we actually do is we have a big gap between big secondary care private health companies and the primary care need that we find a lot of people need. So what we do is we offer private GPs, but for corporate clients. So there's a lot of people who are struggling in the current climate to get in to see a GP, the NHS waiting times, various other factors. So what we do is we provide companies with their own private GP. So that means if somebody's unwell with their minor ailments, they may come into work and they've got a sore throat or an earache or something that they would generally be trying to call the GP at 8 in the morning for and possibly not getting through to the phone lines. We would be available for them, and we will do the remote consultations. But I think our unique selling point is that we actually mainly pride ourselves on doing face-to-face consultations. So we would go in to the workplace. We will see the employees and deal with them then if it can't be dealt with remotely. And we're capable of doing blood tests, doing prescriptions, and also we give annual health checks to everybody. So we would try to be like the old style home visiting GP, which people would have had in the past, but it's also the continuity of care. So they'll have the name GP, you'll be at the business, and we'll be there for them.
Interesting. So a couple of follow-ups then, Wes. Who would be your typical client in terms of size and shape? And what's the commercial model there? Is it insurance linked to employee benefits package, or how does that work?
So currently we're looking really at companies with 50 or more employees, but the top end of that is it could have a company with 1,000 employees, and just on that point, if it was a very big company, we'd be able to actually offer to put a GP in the business. So it's not something that we really have in the UK. It's very rare that you'd actually have a company have an on-site doctor, especially a GP. So for the much larger companies, that's something that we'd offer. They'd have a doctor there, and if an employee needs to see the doctor, they can book in and maybe pop upstairs. The GP's there, and it's all dealt with in-house, so you're not taking time off work. And it just increases productivity within the company because they're able to be on site and get things done. In terms of the models that we're going for, so it's not an insurance linked. We're not doing it through the insurance companies, although some have spoken to us and are interested in partnering with that. It is a subscription-based form model that we're doing. So it's a price per employee per month, and that gives them access to the GP, to the annual health checks, to the 24/7 counselling service. So that's the model that we've gone for at this stage.
And what would a typical price range be per employee then?
Yeah, so it varies. The different packages, which they're all on the website. So we have different packages depending on how many GP consultations a year you have access to, depending on the in-depth level of the health screen that we have. So some will have things like spirometry, ECGs. Others will be doing extra cancer tumour markers. So it's bespoke and it can be tailored to the company. The starting price would be £50 per month per employee. But we see that if somebody's off ill and they're earning quite a lot of money, it's for the company to get somebody to replace them. I think the costs are easily recovered by having access to the GP on site.
Sure. And you mentioned the face-to-face and delivering that across the country. That's quite a resource challenge, Wesley. Tell us a little bit about more from the supply side, from your side, of actually being able to resource that kind of on demand.
Yeah, so obviously when we get a company who's interested, we'll make sure that we have the resources and the doctors in place before we would roll that contract out. But as you'll be aware, many people are aware, there's lots of doctors who, they're trained in the UK, have worked at the NHS, and there's a lot of them, there's a lot of GPs who are going to Australia or they're thinking of leaving the NHS completely. So we're in contact with quite a lot of doctors who are interested in this new model that Prestige are bringing in, and a lot of them have said, they'd be happy to come on board as well. They can still maintain their NHS work or completely work with Prestige, and it's not a matter that we're then necessarily taking GPs out of the NHS and going to the private sector. We feel that if we are providing a GP for a company, say 250 employees, we feel that we are then reducing that workload for the NHS, their own NHS doctors, because hopefully they won't need to go to their own GP as the first point of call. They can come to us, we'll be there for them via Prestige, and that will then free up appointments for other patients who maybe don't have access to this.
So how would that work logistically? Are the people that you're working with, are they part-time with NHS and part-time with you, or are most of them full-time with you? How does that work?
Well, it all depends. So some of them will be part-time, because there's also a lot of doctors who actually work part-time anyway. So they may then locally do other jobs, or they may work in A&E. So some of those would maintain their NHS practice, but maybe do a few days a week for us. And then there are others who've actually said they're willing to completely work full-time for Prestige and be available. And they may be the ones that we put into some of the larger companies who need that continuous GP on site. So it is flexible, but there are a lot of doctors up and down the country who've been in touch with me via LinkedIn or former university friends who went to medical school with, who said, how does this work? It's something I'd be interested in getting on board with.
Interesting. Okay. So I think you said you've been going a year or so, Wesley. How have all these environmental changes impacted on the business and the industry? Clearly, there's the NHS is on the news most days these days with resourcing challenges, etc. So I'm sure that's been an impact. But with the digital revolution, the move to hybrid working, more people working from home, etc. How have all those changes affected your industry and your business, would you say?
I think this was partly the reason why we actually came up with the idea with Prestige, because with COVID, a lot of people working from home, as you mentioned, a lot of the big insured private health companies started adding on 24/7 GP access, and it's always remote. So they kind of picked up on that, and we're offering that service. And what we found is a lot of companies who have the private medical insurance often feel that, oh, we've already got access to a GP. So as an NHS GP myself, I still see patients who would come into my NHS surgery who said, oh, I've seen a private GP on an app through my insurance, but they couldn't do X, Y, and Z because I needed to be examined, needs to look in my ear or feel my abdomen. So they told me to book in to see you in the NHS. And we were seeing that more and more often with the advent of these remote GPs, which made me think, well, there's probably a gap in the market here, because the patients that end up coming to see me face to face are actually quite frustrated that they've got this app, they've got this insurance, but when they needed it, it didn't really help them. And don't get me wrong, there is a place for remote consultations, and we do that. There's plenty of consultations that can be dealt with remotely, and it is a fantastic new innovation that's come on more so with COVID. But it's just for those cases where actually you need that hands-on. So we wanted to be the all-encompassing GP that when you call the doctor from Prestige, you know that they will deal with it. You're not going to be referred back to your GP unnecessarily. We can get the ball rolling. We will liaise with your NHS GP, because we're not a replacement for that service. There is a role for the NHS GPs and for the chronic health management of diabetes, asthma, those sort of things. But if we, for example, see a patient and we do a health check and we find out that they're pre-diabetic or maybe diabetic, we can at least get the ball rolling, maybe start them on something whilst we liaise with their GP so they're not waiting.
Got you. Okay. So what would you say are the main challenges for your business today? You talked about the resourcing, the supply side? Is it on that side of it, or is it more on the demand side? Identifying the right target audience, and on the sales side, where would you say are the main challenges in terms of where you are now and where you're trying to get to?
I say because what we're doing is new. There's no other companies that we're aware of that are solely focusing on corporate clients, providing them with face-to-face GP access when they need it. So it's getting that message across to the company owners, to the HR departments, that there is the service available, because it's new. Most people are aware of, well, we've got private healthcare and it says that we've got 24/7 GP access. So why do we need a GP? It's getting that message across that a lot of their employees are actually using the apps, but they're still having to go back to their NHS GP. Whereas the HR or the owners are going to be unaware of that, because the staff are not going to generally, probably knock on HR and say, well, we've got the app, but I'm still having to see my GP. They'll just deal with it. But we're seeing that from the other side. So it's getting that message across that we're not necessarily a replacement for your primary, your private medical insurance, but there is that gap which is not being covered, and most companies do not have access to a GP for their employees when they need it. So one example that I often give is if an employee came to work this morning and they've got agonizing earache, you could go on the app, but the doctor can't tell without looking in their ear, is it a viral infection which just needs some, paracetamol, painkillers, things like that, or is it actually a bacterial infection, the eardrum's bulging, and you need antibiotics. So that person who is at work, they're not going to go onto their health insurance provider and say, oh, I need to see an ENT consultant surgeon today because I've got ENT cover to look in my ear. They need a GP. So they would go to the app, and most of the time, the app, they will not be able to, they can't look in their ear. So they'd either then defer them to come into the city centre and we'll see you at some place at some time, or we'll say, actually, you'll need to see your own GP. Whereas with Prestige, if one of the employees has that issue, they can get in touch with us, and then we can then say, okay, we'll come and see you later on. When's best for you today? We'll have a look in their ears. We can then do the prescriptions at that time. Prescriptions will then be delivered to them. If something else flags up and we feel, oh, well, maybe we need to do some blood tests, we can do that at the same time as well, get the results and get back to them. So it's a one-stop shop where everything's dealt with. And that's the way I think everyone wants that Amazon Prime next day delivery sort of lifestyle now. So we want to be able to offer that service, which I don't think there is at the moment in terms of general practice care.
Got you. Okay. Well, hopefully the Business Spotlight interview might help with that, getting that message across, Wesley. What about aspirations for the business? Where do you see this in 5 years' time, and how different do you think it's going to be compared to today?
Well, I'm hoping in 5 years' time, if we can get that awareness out there, that people will be aware that there is this service. It's not always just remote GPs. And I mean, the goal of myself and my co-founder is that Prestige Private Health will be known as the go-to corporate GPs. So if you're a law firm and you need a GP, we'll get in touch with Prestige. They'll be the guys that will have either on site or they'll come in and see ours. And we're hoping that that's the thing, really, that Prestige Private Health will be known for that. And I'm sure there'll be other companies that will be maybe doing similar. But I think we feel like we are probably going to be the first one. So we want to corner that part of the market and make it as best as we can do for employees.
Very good. And what about lessons you've learned as you've become a business owner, Wesley? Clearly, you've got the specialist technical medical background, but that obviously doesn't prepare you for sales, marketing, leadership, other elements of business ownership that are so important. So it'd be really great to hear your reflections on what you think you've learned as the top lessons, and maybe what advice you'd be giving yourself, having learned what you have over the last year or so.
It's definitely a steep learning curve. I think for most doctors, we've worked in the NHS all our lives. We've never had to do sales pitches or anything like that, really. So I've got my own NHS GP practice. I'm the senior partner there. So it is a business, but it's not the same as doing a private business where you know, having to speak to HR individuals or go to networking events. So I think the biggest challenge for me is probably moving out of my comfort zone and having to, you know, speak to these company directors, HR people, finance people who I've never had to deal with, and getting across the passion I have for Prestige, knowing that it's such a needed business from the medical side of things, but then getting that view across to people on the other side who maybe not too sure, is it necessary, do they need it? So if I was to tell my younger self, one thing I would say is networking is so important. I mean, the people in your network, because it doesn't have to just be business owners that I'm talking to. I could be talking to somebody who is a secretary in a company, but if I've got a good rapport with them and they hear what I have to say about what we actually offer to them, they may then have a good rapport with the CEO, and they will then mention it, and they will contact us. So I think networking is really important for business. And as you're, you know, from when I was at university through to now, if you make those connections, and it's not always making connections thinking, oh, well, I might have a business in the future, I might need them. It's just having connections with people, seeing what they do, showing an interest. And, you know, I think what goes around comes around. If you show an interest in others, they'll also show an interest in you.
So what networking channels, do you use then? Is it the Chamber of Commerce, or is it formal channels like that, or is networks you created yourself? Tell us a little bit more about that, please.
Yes, it's more so the Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Manchester one are very good. So try and use those, and we've got a store coming up at an upcoming event. It's in November, but there's other networking events through them that we'll try and go to. I have been to a BNI one. I was invited to one of those, and again, it's just getting it out there and letting people know that there is this company called Prestige Private Health. We do this that you're probably unaware of, and it's just, you know, talking to as many people as possible. LinkedIn's great also to get in touch with people you may never have come into contact with. So again, it's just using all those avenues and seeing what comes from them.
Great. Well, it's been great to hear your journey. It's always good to hear about a business with quite a unique offering that fits, you know, quite an interesting way in terms of how things are moving in the workplace. So final question then, Wesley, in terms of if there's any HR directors or business owners kind of a bit intrigued about whether this might help attract and retain employees in their business, what might you suggest as a next step?
So for anyone who's, you know, maybe listened to this and it sparked an interest in realizing that there's this sort of service out there, you can always reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. I'm very approachable. Or you can get in touch with us via the website, prestigeprivatehealth.co.uk. Telephone numbers on there. You can call us at the office as well. And then, yeah, we can have a discussion, maybe see what you already have in place and how we can plug that gap, or how we can complement what you already have. And then we can just take things from there. Very
good. Well, we'll certainly add that URL to the post, a link to this this video. But once again, thanks ever so much for your time, your contribution, and all the very best with Prestige.
Thank you very much.